Back out in the garage today for another project. This one happens to be another winch project, unfortunately. This time we're going to be working on the winch on the truck. It has also got a corroded pin, and last time I used it, I had to stand there and hold the plug in kind of cocked off to the side so that it would actually work while I was trying to winch a vehicle out. So we're going to replace that plug today. And it's going to be a little bit different because the Warn is a 5-wire system, and most winches are a 3-wire system. But let me flip you around here. All right, come down here. We got our good old-fashioned Badlands controller again. This works so well on the Jeep that I'm going to adapt it again to make it work on the truck. Here's a cable, and this is why I hate Warn. This little cable from Warn here, that's a $100 cable. Thanks, Warn. Proprietary ends and all that kind of stuff. But I needed it to replace on the truck over here because it's a power wagon, has a factory installed winch on it. That factory installed winch is a Warn winch, and inside the front bumper there is where the winch control actually plugs in. It doesn't plug in. You can see it in there. Doesn't plug into the winch like a traditional setup because it's factory installed from Chrysler and Warn. But we're going to replace that plug on the front of the truck. I'm going to swing back over here. Then we're going to use this cable to build us an adapter to go from our Badlands controller to our Warn winch cable. But first I want to show you a little bit about how winches work. I think that might help in our discussion today. So I'm going to flip you around here. Got a little whiteboard drawing, and we can go over how winches work and how the Warn 5-wire system is different from your traditional 3-wire. Alright, hopefully you can see this well enough. This little drawing, you'll have to forgive my art skills. I definitely am not an artist. But this little diagram I made to kind of help us understand a little bit better how winches work in general and how the Warn in particular with their 5-wire system works. So on our drawing here, we got our battery. Battery ground down here to the winch. That's a heavy cable. It's usually a 4-gauge or so cable going from your battery to your winch, and a hot wire also going from your battery to your winch. Notice we got some other colors in here. These colors aren't representative of the actual wire colors, but I wanted to put them in a different color, and those are the marker colors I had. So the way a winch typically works is you have a solenoid control box on top, and you've got some heavy-duty inputs on the side of the winch. Your hot cable comes down here to your control solenoid. Typically a solenoid, can be contactors and some other things, but typically a solenoid. It comes down here, and then you have an in and an out, and it comes down here to a different pole on your winch motor. One spins it forward, one spins it backwards. Now your solenoid is nothing more than a switch that's controlled by a switch. So inside this solenoid, what you have, the contactors that close the switch loop or close the loop between the hot in and either the in or the out on your solenoid is controlled by an electromagnet. Basically what it has is it has a spring that pushes it open, and when you energize the electromagnet pulls it closed. That's a basic solenoid function. The electromagnet part of the system is controlled by another switch, which in this case is going to be our winch controller. So you can see on a standard 3-wire system here, our hot comes in, our main power to our winch comes in here, and then we have another little wire that comes off. And right about here we're going to put this in here like this, and we're going to change our drawing here just a little bit. So this goes this way and this goes this way, just so you can kind of help visualize here. This is the plug on the winch side of it, this is the plug on the controller side of it. But anyway, you got a hot wire that comes out, goes up here to our winch control. It has a simple single pole dual throw switch. Push it one way, it closes the circuit one way. Push it the other way, it closes the circuit the other way. So what it does, sends power out here. When you push either your in or your out, it will send power back on either the green or the blue. back here to our solenoid, and then that will energize the electromagnet and close the contactor for either our in or our out over here to the winch motor. Now your solenoid needs a ground as well, so you can see I threw this little wire here is representative of another small wire that goes to our battery ground. And what it does is it allows the path to complete for the electromagnet to close the solenoid. Power goes out, switches, power comes back in, energizes the electromagnet, goes to ground, back to your battery. Now that's how a standard 3-wire winch system works. Warn, in their infinite wisdom, decided that they wanted to add an extra safety to their winches. I actually emailed them and asked them this question about what in the world is this for, and they claim it's a safety function. But their 5-wire system, what they do is they actually break the ground right here, and they run a ground out like this, and then they run a ground back like this and complete the circuit there. So what their switch does inside their controller is it not only switches the hot leads coming to our in and outside of our solenoid, it switches the ground circuit and completes that circuit inside the switch. They call it a safety system, that if something malfunctions, letting go of the switch breaks the ground as well as breaking the hot. I think that was more lawyers involved than engineers, and the engineers just did the best they could to make the lawyers happy. Personal opinion, but that's kind of what I see from overcomplicating a otherwise simple system. So what we have when we have a Warn winch control, here's our pinout for our winch control. You can screenshot that or take a picture of it if you want. So we have, just like a standard 3-wire, we got a 12-volt coming in. That'll be representative of our red wire here. Then we have an in and an out pole. That'd be representative of our green and blue over here. And that works just like a typical 3-wire system. But what you have is you have these 2 extra grounds. What I've got represented here is what I'll call the battery ground. That's this side of the system. It comes over here, grounds to our negative side of our battery through the switch. And then we have what I'm calling the relay ground. That's the ground wire here to our relay, this one here, that actually completes that circuit. So what happens when you flip a switch in a Warn controller, you got hot coming in, flip it to in, the hot comes back out, in this case the blue wire goes in, but it also switches the ground. So when this hot comes in here to our solenoid, the ground goes back out through the same switch and then comes back out here and completes our ground circuit. So that's what we have to deal with, is this extra ground circuit when we're working with a Warn 5-wire winch. What I'm going to do in this situation is, to make this controller work, is I'm going to simply, fortunately with ground, it doesn't really matter what path it takes. Ground is ground. So I'm going to take out here, and I'm just going to tie these 2 wires together. I'm going to eliminate them. They're not even going to go out to my controller. We're just going to tie them together right here, basically. And what that's going to do is that's going to have our ground just go through a loop and back in. It's going to be the same as a 3-wire controller. It's just going to be on this side of the plug. I'm going to do it on this side of the plug on there. I don't want to touch anything from this side of the plug back on that truck. Being that the winch is factory installed, it's all under warranty, and I don't want to go in there messing with wires that are still under warranty and have something go wrong and void a warranty on something like that. So, but you could make this modification back here inside your winch controller, just back here inside your box. You could tie those 2 grounds together and make this work if you're in a situation where you've got an externally mounted Warn winch that's not part of the factory electronics of the truck. That would work on a standard Warn winch, and then you could go, what that basically does is reverts you to a standard 3-wire winch control, which will allow us to use our Harbor Freight wireless. And again, you ask, why am I messing around with a Harbor Freight wireless when Warn actually makes a wireless system? Well, Warn's wireless control system is $300. Thanks, Warn. They are pretty proud of their product. So I'd rather spend $40 in a half a day in my shop making it work than give Warren $300 for a simple remote control system. So that's today's project. We'll get started on that and show you how it goes. Back over the bench here for a minute. So this is the cable I pulled off the front of the truck. It's a Chrysler engineered part to this plugs, fortunately, a quick release up underneath the front end of the truck, so you can pull this out. By the way, if you go to Chrysler to buy this piece, it's an $85 part. Thanks, Warren. So this is the part that goes into the truck, and here we've got our Warn cable. This side of the cable is exactly the same configuration. So what we're going to do now is we're going to cut this factory Dodge Chrysler connector off of the Warn part. We're going to cut our cable here. UPS man. I'm going to cut our cable here, and we're going to just splice these together. One part of this that I'm still not 100% sure of is color code. I'm hoping that this color code matches this color code. If not, we're going to have to do some pinout work and figure out the color code configuration. If we get to that point, we'll do that. I'm really hoping we're not. But I'm going to go ahead and start cutting these apart, and we'll go from there. All right. So looking at that, it does look like our colors are going to be a little bit different here. There's actually 6 wires inside this. We don't need the 6 ones, so maybe we'll get lucky. We'll get this cracked open and see. Got these both cut off. This is the factory. This is the Chrysler part. It's got 5 wires. As we look at the Warn part, it actually has 6, but 5 of the 6 match, and this blue is an extra. So we're just going to do some quick pinout tests, some continuity tests with a multimeter here, and just make sure that the wires correspond to the same pin slots on our plug. So we're just going to take this and do some quick continuity tests and just double check that everything matches up. Alright, so our pinout test just confirmed that the wiring colors do match up. Checked every one of those against the colors here, and each one of these wires corresponds to the same plug on the front. So we're good to go here, which also matches our pinout configuration that we had shown in the earlier video. So we're going to proceed on from here, start wiring things together. So here we have our finished product. I didn't think you guys would want to sit there and watch me cut and splice and crimp a bunch of wires, but there you go. That's our replacement piece. All our wire colors matched up. Got the Dodge factory plug on this side, got the Warn factory plug on this side. So we're going to take this over the truck, plug it in, and grab the wired control and make sure that everything works, and then we'll move on to second phase of this, which is making our Badlands controller work with our Warn Winch. Stage 1 success. Went over the truck, got everything plugged back in, and everything worked just like it was supposed to. So we now have a replacement plug that's not nice and corroded as that one is. It actually has functioning pins in there. So now we'll move on to stage 2 of our project here, and this is where we got another Badlands controller. One thing I did find out is there seems to be multiple versions of these that are sold in the same as the same thing through Harbor Freight. This one is slightly different than the one I just did on the Jeep. This one actually feels a little bit better quality. Plastic's a little better quality, fuse holder. I pulled this apart yesterday just to double check a couple of things, and The quality of the connections inside, things are insulated, shrink tube. Definitely a little bit higher quality part. I have no idea how to tell the difference other than this wire hanging out here. This is actually an antenna, an external antenna to get better reception between the remote control and the box here. So I would look for the ones that have the wire hanging out if there's a different versions on the shelf when you go to look for one of these. But this one's definitely a little bit higher quality, I think, than the other one. So we're going to do a similar mod to what we did on the Smittybilt winch with this Warn here. Except this time, what I'm planning on doing is just splicing these together. Leaving our little plug into the front of the truck attached here to our box, so that this will plug in, basically go in and out like your standard winch controller. You get out, you plug in the front of the truck, and you've got wireless control, or you can unplug it, plug your wired control in, and have standard wired control. I'm doing it this way on the truck because there's just not a good place to mount this box hardwired on the front of the truck. Everything's tucked up in with that winch on the truck, and I don't really want to mess with the factory wiring. Everything inside there is still covered under the warranty on the truck, and I'm afraid that if I go tapping into the wiring inside there that I'll void a warranty somewhere and end up screwing myself down the line. So this one's going to be a little different. We're just going to mate these two together and make a winch controller that will plug into the front of the truck. And since we're doing that, obviously the wiring colors didn't match up like they did on the Jeep, unfortunately. So yesterday I took a little time and just figured out what our colors were on here. On this particular one, red's positive, black is negative like you'd expect, and our green is in and our white is out. And I just did that with, I have a little 12-volt power source that I hooked up. I took the control box apart here and looked inside. It was easy to tell that by where it attached to the circuit board in there that red was hot and black was ground. So that was easy to figure out. Then I just had to figure out in and out. So I just took this up to a 12-volt battery source and then used a multimeter or a test. I just used a test light in that situation. And I hit the button on the winch and saw which one of these on the winch controller to see which one of those lit up, and marked it, and then checked the other one to make sure it lit up. So now we've got them marked. Well, a bit of good news. Kind of surprised actually, but our wiring colors actually match between the Warn and the Smittybilt controller. I just did some pinout tests on our plug here, continuity tests, and just checked it against our wiring diagram, and sure enough, all of our wire colors match. So that's going to make this next step really easy, just color to color. Now let me explain one thing about the controller, in case you don't know. The way these controllers work, it does have a hot that goes out to from the battery out to the controller to power the circuit board in there. It's also the switches in there send the power back via either the white or the green wire, white being out, green being in. And then it has a black wire here. This is a ground wire, and that ground wire is there so that the circuit board inside the controller actually has a ground. It needs a ground, obviously, to make the circuit board work. So in this controller we have a ground, a hot, and an in and an out. Over here on our Warn plug, if you remember from our wiring diagram, we talked about how Warn switches their ground. So what we have when you look at this is you have red is hot, green and white are in and out on the for your winch control, and then you got your black and your brown over here. Your black is our battery ground. It goes to the battery, and our brown is our relay ground. So that is the switch portion of the winch controller, the Warn winch controller. This allows the circuit to complete for the solenoid, for the control of the solenoid, I should say. So what we're going to do is we're actually just going to take and tie these two together inside our plug here. And all that's doing is that's doing the same thing the switch would do inside your Warn winch controller. We're just going to do that all the time. That's how every other winch in the world basically is wired except for Warn. they decided to switch their ground. They call it a safety feature. I disagree, but their engineers and lawyers are paid way more than I am, so I'll just have to take their word for it. But we're going to tie those together, and now we've got basically 4 wires. We're going to hook our ground from our controller, our wireless controller, to our tied together grounds here, hot to hot, in to in, and out to out. And that's going to be the next stage of what I'm doing here. All right, here we are over the truck. Got everything put together. So you got the controller wired to it, shrink tube. My connection's all down real good. Left a little bit of wire here, and I'll show you what I'm going to do, but let's plug it in and make sure it works. We plug in our wired control. There's our box. Here's our controller. And we go out, and we go in. So just like that, we've got ourselves a wireless controller. Harbor Freight Badlands winch controller working on a Warn winch. I've got one little more idea here for this. I've got some magnets, and I'm just going to attach some magnets to this so that this will just magnet to the front of the steel bumper here when I'm using it, and then when I'm done I can just pop it off, pop everything off and go. Down to the final stage here, getting some magnets attached to our controller, and I'll show you what I found here. This is kind of funny. I've got a bunch of these little hooks, magnet hooks. I used them to go on actually use them on the Jeep, stick them to the Jeep and hang Christmas lights on them for Christmas parades. But perfect little magnets, and the hook screws out of them. And these, I just laugh, these couldn't be more perfect. They fit these holes on this controller so perfect. The exact same hole size, fit right in there, and they'll accept M4 screw. So I ran over to Home Depot or Lowe's or whatever, grabbed some M4 hardware, and now we're just gonna screw these on. I'm chuckling at this because I can't believe these are such a perfect fit for this application. Okay, here we are at the truck with the finished product. Inside there you can see the plug, splice we made in the cable, and out here to our Badlands controller. And you can see that's just stuck on there with magnets. So all I'll have to do when I want to use this, plug it in just like I would a normal controller, grab my wireless control, out, in, and there you have it. That's how you adapt a Badlands 3-wire wireless winch control to a Warn 5-wire winch. Hope you guys enjoyed that one.